What's up, Duval? It's your favorite former Jag, Bucky Brooks, and I am here hosting Believe in Jaguars, a pod dedicated to the Jacksonville Jaguars and everything that is going on around the team. We are in the middle of kind of like the first week of OTAs. We've completed 2 OTA practices, had a chance to kind of take a peek at the Jaguars up close and personal. And let me say, man, I'm really impressed with what the team has done, how the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Can't really get into all of the ins and outs with the depth chart and personnel and how you guys are playing because right now, let's be honest, the team is running around in jerseys and shorts. They're more in a learning, teaching environment, more so than a competitive environment. And I'll say this: Doug Pederson stood in front of the press the other day, and he said the number one goal of OTAs right now is just to make sure we stay healthy. He wants to make sure that the team learns how to practice, that they're playing fast, they're competitive, but they're taking care of one another. Because what you would like to do is kind of set the foundation for how you would have to practice in the fall, meaning you want the team to be able to take the pads off. You want them to be able to get the work in without getting anyone hurt. Because if you can do that, particularly given the length of the season, it gives your team a chance to kind of take away some of the wear and tear on the bodies of the players while still getting the work that you need to get done to be prepared when it comes to Sundays and when you kick it off on 1 o'clock. I will say what I noticed right away, the vibe is certainly different around the team. This is a team that is very serious and diligent about the way they go about their business. I think there has been an emphasis from Doug Pederson down to the coordinators, down to the position coaches, that they want to make sure that they practice like pros. And what I mean by that is there's a certain standard that comes along with being a championship team and the way that you prepare. You can feel it when you're out on the field. You can feel that, man, this is a real professional environment, a championship environment, one where if you're looking at the offense, the ball rarely touches the ground. There are few incomplete passes. There are not any botched snaps, no fumbles. You don't have many false start penalties. Everything is operating at a very crisp rate. I can say the first couple of days of practice, man, I saw that first by watching it right on the field, but then observing it from up top, you can just see that this team is kind of playing fast, operating fast. There's been a concerted effort to operate and move with more urgency. It doesn't seem like it would matter much, but just the little things in terms of breaking the huddle, running to the line of scrimmage, the defense coming together, getting to your positions right, getting in good stances. It wouldn't seem like those things would matter when we get to the National Football League. But when you talk to the coaches and when you talk to players, they just talk about, man, before you can have a good play, before you can execute a good play at a high level, you got to make sure you have a good huddle break. You got to make sure you get in your stance, you get lined up, you know your assignment, you're ready to play, and you're ready to go when the ball is snapped. I can see that has been really a concerted effort, just the way the team is moving around. And as they continue to build on that, and as they continue to, I would say, assimilate the young guys, the rookies, the new players into how they want to go about doing it, you'll see the culture change. You'll see this locker room kind of become one where, look, it's a player-led team as opposed to a coach-led team. And when the players can take what the coaches are saying and what the coaches are emphasizing and hold themselves accountable, that's when the team has an opportunity to be a really, really good team. So far, so good. It's only a couple of days of practice, but you certainly can see the attention to detail and the emphasis on doing the little things right has certainly been a big topic or theme of discussion throughout the offseason. The second thing that I think came out of just kind of watching the team operate, this team is operating right now without a depth chart on either side of the ball. Doug Pederson talked about it in the presser. Ryan Nielsen has talked about it when it comes to the defense. Right now, they don't want to be bogged down with a depth chart. They said that this is not an evaluation period. This is more of a developmental period. We want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what they're doing. We want to make sure that we do it and operate fast. We want to get all those hiccups out the way. So when we get to training camp, we can see the players at their best competing for the jobs that are available. So don't worry so much about the combinations and things that you see when you get an opportunity to either read about it or see little clips on TV. Right now, they're not really worried about the depth chart. They want to see what tools each player has, how those tools can be kind of incorporated into a bigger picture so the team can maximize the talents of every player. And when you do that, it gives the team an opportunity to operate at a very, very high level. That said, I think there is something to operating without a depth chart and some of the things that the Jaguars are doing. Last year, I had a conversation. Doug Pederson kind of described some of the things that they do at wide receiver as musical chairs. And so, as he described it to me, they will run drills where the wide receivers will change spots after every play. So, if you can imagine, we run 5 plays in a row. You start out at X, the next play you go to Y, the play after that you go to E, the play after that you go to Z, and then maybe you finish the 5th play at X again. And as everyone is rotating through, what it does is it allows everyone to understand the offense from every different position, particularly on the perimeter. It allows you to learn the full, every option of the play. So that gives you a better mastery of what you're doing and why you have to do it a certain way when certain plays are called in the game. It also builds the opportunity to have what we call interchangeable parts on the perimeter. Going back to 2 years ago when Marvin Jones and Zay Jones and Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram were on the field, the team that went to the playoffs, what they could do is they literally could move people around without issue. Sometimes Christian could play outside, they could play inside. Marvin Jones could bounce around and do a bunch of different things. And that is kind of the best that the offense has operated because anyone could play anywhere, and it gave them the freedom to be able to create or exploit mismatches on the perimeter while running the same concepts for the quarterback. So as it was told to me, easy for the quarterback, harder for the defense because now the concepts are the same, but you have different people running them. And so for the defense, it may look like a different play, but for the offense, in particular for Trevor, it's the same play. We are seeing the team kind of try and get back to some of that stuff where moving people around, challenging them to get in those spots, challenging a bunch of young guys to kind of understand the bigger picture in hopes of building, I would say, a better, more diverse offensive approach while keeping the game very, very simple for Trevor Lawrence. I would say in doing the no depth chart thing, you also are seeing more guys get into the rotation, even in the backfield. Travis Etienne, Dearness Johnson, Tank Bigsby, all guys kind of bouncing in and out with the first group. So you have hopes that, hey, we're going to play more people. And we've already heard Doug Pederson talk about the importance of keeping Travis Etienne fresh as it comes down the stretch. They need to get more from Tank Bigsby. I firmly believe that Tank Bigsby is going to have a big role on this offense, and he is going to spell Travis Etienne. And the hopes will be, a two-headed monster when you get down the stretch, force the defense to deal with multiple styles of running backs while also dealing with a very explosive passing game where all the pieces kind of move around the chessboard and create some issues. Along the offensive line, you also have some of that working, even though it's a little more challenging and difficult to play musical chairs along the offensive line because guys get very comfortable in their situations. I do believe that depth is a huge issue for the offensive line, and some of the backup players certainly have to get ready to do some different things. So we think about Walker Little being able to play right and left tackle, Tyler Shatley being able to bounce in and be a key reserve inside. We think about Luke Forkner, whether he starts or he's a backup, he's going to have to be able to do multiple things to get in. Ideally, you want to dress 8 or 9 offensive linemen on game day. Some of those guys have to be swing players so that you can cover multiple spots and make sure that the team is protected in the event of injury on game day. We're seeing some of that stuff kind of play out as they're also trying to teach the young guys how to get going, how to break the huddle, how to get lined up, how to do some of the basic play calls that we've seen. The no depth chart also goes with the quarterbacks. Just got to notice in the rotation early, Mac Jones sometimes goes in second. The other day he goes in third. But I think it's important when it comes to the quarterback to give him reps with the ones while also making sure he's comfortable with the 2s and 3s because you just never know. You just don't want to be caught in a situation where Trevor Lawrence is dinged up. You have to put another quarterback in. They're not familiar with the top wide receivers, so the rhythm and the chemistry is off, and the offense bogs down. I think the learning lesson to be gained from last year is just want to be better prepared when it comes to being a quarterback better prepared really at all positions because the injuries really derailed what should have been a really good season last year. I think the Jaguars are trying to learn from that, and part of operating with no depth chart is designed to help this offense be fluid so they can absorb an injury, even though they didn't bring in a lot of new guys to upgrade some of the personnel, particularly at the offensive line position. Quick note out at wide receiver, some quick observations that kind of stood out to me. Now, I think Devin Duvernay is going to have a bigger role than just being the returner. We saw the Jaguars work on some of the kickoff return stuff and that stuff. And look, it's a different setup, it's a different design, but a dynamic returner certainly can move the ball and create more big plays than we've seen the last few years. Jamal Agnew was a huge addition and asset to the team the previous years. And so you replace a Pro Bowl returner with another All-Pro, Pro Bowl caliber player in Duvernay. But I'll say, man, I can envision him being the fourth wide receiver and making some plays. His speed is apparent. He gives them another fast guy on the perimeter. He's been given opportunities in Baltimore and really taking advantage of those opportunities. I wouldn't be surprised to see him do what Jamal Agnew did last year, but I think he might be able to have a more expanded role because he's a more polished playmaker and a better receiver than Jamal was, even though Jamal did some great things at times on offense. But keep an eye on Devin Duvernay. He is someone that is certainly of interest. And as you think about the three wide receivers, BTJ, Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, Devin Duvernay being able to jump in certainly can help this team kind of expand what they're doing, particularly if they go 10 personnel. That's one back, four wideouts, no tight ends. Just gives them a different dynamic with his speed being a major factor. But let's go to the defensive side of the ball and talk about that right quick. Ryan Nielsen, I've talked about his intensity. I have talked about what he shared with me in terms of just wanting to make it really, really important that this staff was full of teachers who were really good instructors, meaning they not only could talk about it on the board, but they had drills and things in place that would help this team and these players get better. Even though this team has some older players in key spots, it's really a young team. And when we think about the youth of the team and how the team may get younger in the coming years, particularly when Trevor Lawrence signs his deal, you want to make sure that you have developers in place who not only can develop young players, but are willing to play the young players. Sometimes when you work for teams, the scouts and the coaches don't see eye to eye when it comes to player development. The scouts always want the young guys to get on the field, to give them an opportunity to grow and develop and to make contributions very early in their careers. Coaches are a little more reluctant to put young guys on the field because there's a trust factor. Can I trust that they're going to do exactly what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how they're supposed to do it? Well, the way that you bridge that gap, you hire a bunch of coaches that are great teachers that can put the young guys in a position to do the same drills every day so we can see a natural development and improvement and progression. And as they develop and as they gain more confidence and as they have opportunities to play and they cash in on those opportunities, then you begin to feel more confident that you can put them in games and allow them to play. Ryan Nielsen has done a really good job of assembling a coaching staff that appears to have that. And the only way that I can say that and kind of convey it to you is when you watch these guys practice, the drills make sense. They're kind of like building blocks. When you watch them in individual, then you watch them in small group work, then you watch them in team, the things that they do at the early part of practice, you see them show up in team. To me, that is a sign of a good coach. It's also something that as a former player, I always appreciated because I always wanted coaches who could give me drills that made sense and that directly related to the things that we are doing. If you think about it as a high school teacher or being a high school student, what you would like is I want my teacher to give me a little bit the answers to the test. So when we do take the test, I can ace it. I feel like when I watch the team practice, I feel like the coaches are really setting their players up to ace the test when it comes to 7-on-7 and team drills because the individual work makes sense. The individual work matches what they're being asked to do. Now, let's talk about the depth chart and what I'm seeing. It appears that versatility is really a top priority for this team. There's been a lot of conversation about this team making a move to a 4-3 defense adding the Sam linebacker back into the mix after using a 3-4 defense for the last few years. Naturally, when I first heard the conversation about the Sam linebacker, which is really the strong side linebacker, that is the linebacker that plays down over the top of the tight end in base sets, meaning he's going to walk up right over top of the tight end, put his hands on the tight end. And he, in essence, is almost like a fifth defender at the line of scrimmage. That skill set requires you to be physical, to have the size to deal with the tight ends, but also have the speed and athleticism to run with them. Well, naturally, when I thought about it, I thought this is going to be a great position for Devin Lloyd. I expected to walk out to practice and see Devin Lloyd playing the Sam linebacker position because that's what he played at Utah. He was a star at Utah playing in that role because that role allows you not only to hammer the tight end, but it makes you be an occasional pass rusher while also jumping into coverage. All of the things that he did really, really well at Utah. What was interesting is when you watch the Jaguars practice, they had multiple guys kind of playing that role. I looked up Chad Muma was lined up over top of the tight end playing Sam with Foye Oluokun at Mike linebacker and Devin Lloyd at Will linebacker. Then a couple series later, I saw Devin Lloyd playing the Sam and Muma and Oluokun off the ball, playing Mike and Will respectively. Then you look up, you see some of the backups also jumping in and moving around, like you see Abdullah lining up over the tight end, but then other times having the opportunity to be an off-ball linebacker. And the thing that stood out to me, oh, this is an evaluation where you're trying to figure out who has what skills, who has what tools in the toolbox. How can we utilize the tools that these guys have to put them on the field, whether it's in special packages, whether it's as a starter, whether it's a game plan matchup that you would like to utilize because certain guys have favorable skill sets against other guys. To me, it was smart because now what you're trying to do is create a linebacker core that has Swiss Army knives, guys that can do multiple things so you can get the best 11 on the field at all times. And even though I would say they're letting everybody play those roles, to me, the two guys that stand out at the Sam linebacker position for the Jags. One, that's Devin Lloyd, because it's very natural for him. I believe it's the role that he played at Utah, where he flourished and became a first-round pick, was an all Pac-12 defender, had 8 sacks, had 4 interceptions, just made a bunch of splash plays at that. The other guy that stands out to me is Yasir Abdullah, because Abdullah's speed, quickness, his burst, his energy, I could see him being a guy that could play in that role. What it also does, it begins to maybe create the conversation and the discussion that in nickel, can one of these guys become the fourth pass rusher? Meaning, can Devin Lloyd, either from a stand-up position or in a three-point stance, can he become the edge rusher opposite Josh Allen that allows Trayvon Walker to kick inside with Eric Armstead on obvious passing downs? Because if you can do that, then what that does is that allows you to put Chad Muma and Foye Oluokun at your backers. It allows you to put 5 defensive backs on the field, and your pass rush is enhanced because you have another athletic pass rusher that comes from the linebacker core, as opposed to what we've talked about. Well, maybe they need to go out in free agency and bring somebody in. Maybe they need to go back and get a Yannick Ngakoue to be the third pass rusher. Maybe the Jaguars have it in their plans that that additional pass rusher is going to come from within, and it's going to be a linebacker that has the ability to be an edge rusher on certain situations. Just keep an eye on that. I think it's something of interest. I can't say that it's confirmed, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see that play out down the line. When it comes to utility players in the secondary, another development that is one that is interesting to me, that is Darnell Savage. Darnell Savage was signed to a deal, comes over from the Green Bay Packers. I think a lot of us expected him, maybe to jump in as safety. It might be him and Cisco or him and Antonio Johnson. How are they going to move this around? Well, the first couple of days of OTAs, it was really interesting watching the various nickel packages that they trotted out there. Sometimes Dewey and Cisco were in the back end, and they had a revolving door at nickel with Ron Darby and Tyson Campbell on the edges. Remember, we're not looking at depth charts, but we're just kind of seeing and noticing some of the things. Dewey and Cisco, sometimes Cisco would be down. Dewey would be in the deep middle if they're playing man-to-man and everyone else is matching up. Other times we would see different combinations where you have Antonio Johnson in, and maybe Antonio Johnson is the deep middle safety and someone else is dropping down like Daniel Thomas and those things. And the thing that struck me, particularly as it relates to Darnell Savage, Ryan Nielsen talked about, hey, what we want to do is see how everybody handles different responsibilities that come along with playing different spots. So the nickel position may require you to blitz, to play the run, to cover in man-to-man. Well, who has the toolbox that can do all of those things? And what we're seeing is an open audition for that position, whether the team is playing a traditional nickel where, hey, maybe we need to cover. We need someone that can go and play man-to-man on the slot receiver. Or maybe we play what they call big nickel, drop a third safety in the game, someone that can blitz off the edge, someone that is stout and sturdy against the run, but is good enough to cover in man-to-man. Well, Darnell Savage strikes me as someone who certainly has a toolbox that is expansive enough to be able to do a bunch of different things. And early on, they're certainly giving him and a handful of other guys opportunities to showcase those skills as hybrid players. It's interesting. It is something that's part of, I think, a bigger plan that we see this team kind of break the defense out the plastic on the first week against the Miami Dolphins. I think we could see a handful of guys kind of trotting there at nickel and at linebacker to really maximize the potential so they can enhance and upgrade the pass rush while also tightening down the coverage as a team kind of morphs into a team that plays a lot of man-to-man. I would say so far so good. Didn't have an opportunity really to evaluate a lot of the young players because they're still learning and still new. But I think in time, in a week or so, we'll begin to hear the conversation about the young guys, the two cornerbacks that were drafted, Jones and Prince, as they come over and try and kind of make their way. But I will say in individual, they look good enough. They look the part. Now we have an opportunity. We got to wait to see them in one-on-one, see them in team drill, see them cover when it really matters to see if they can hold up and if they're ready for prime time, a big role as a young player and those things. Finally, I can't let this go because I saw this and it irked me. My guy from ESPN, Dan Orlovsky, love Dan, love a lot of the work that he does, but he was talking about Trevor Lawrence and he was talking about Trevor Lawrence about to get paid. And Dan appears to have maybe a little an issue with Trevor Lawrence getting the bag that is going to a bunch of these quarterbacks. So we just saw Jared Goff sign a huge contract with the Detroit Lions, 4-year, $212 million. It's an average of about $53 million annually. It's kind of the going rate for the upper echelon quarterback. Well, it's no secret that Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars are negotiating a deal simultaneously. Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins are also negotiating a deal that probably will put both players in the $50 million club. Now, if you look at around the league, that's kind of what it is. That's what quarterbacks are getting paid. Joe Burrow signed a deal that I think put him at 52, 53 million. We've seen top of the market is right at that spot. So we have to prepare ourselves that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the next quarterback to make his way into the club. Well, Dan Orlovsky had an issue with Trevor getting into the club because he said he hadn't played at an elite level that is worthy of being in the $50 million range. And I'll say this, Dan, you're right. He hasn't consistently been a top 5 player. He hasn't been like a top 7 player. But here's what I will say. Trevor Lawrence is a top 10 quarterback. Whether we like the inconsistencies or not, he is a top 10 quarterback. Dan Orlovsky tried to paint a picture that Trevor Lawrence is not a top 12 quarterback. So what I decided to do is, hey, let's look at the quarterbacks in the National Football League, and let's not give lifetime achievement awards, but let's talk about where these quarterbacks are and where Trevor Lawrence would fit. So let's just look in the AFC first. So in the AFC, the guys that I think probably will do rank ahead of Trevor Lawrence just right now based on last year, Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and C.J. Stroud. So those are 6 guys. After that point, Trevor Lawrence is in that conversation. Yeah, we'll talk about Tua Tagovailoa, but I think you can make a case for as much as you like Tua From the production, I think we can make the argument that Trevor Lawrence is a better prospect in terms of height, weight, speed, size, arm talent, tools, what he brings to the table, all of that. You could put him in the same conversation there. The only other quarterback in the AFC that we could talk about in that conversation, we can talk about Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson hasn't played at that level. So at his worst, Trevor Lawrence is in the conversation, the 7 in the AFC. Now let's cast our eyes to the NFC. In the NFC, the top quarterbacks are as follows: Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, and Kyler Murray. Of those guys, how many of those guys could we say clearly are better than Trevor Lawrence? Brock Purdy has played better than Trevor Lawrence in a system that is really set up for him to thrive. And I love Brock Purdy. He's done a really good job being a point guard in an offense where they have maybe one of the best supporting casts that you can give a young quarterback. Cool. But we can talk about as a prospect and as a player, if we're having this one-off, Brock Purdy and Trevor Lawrence has more arm talent. Trevor Lawrence has more athleticism. Yes, Brock Purdy has better production, but if we're playing players on projection, I think you can project out that Trevor Lawrence in over time could be a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. Well, now let's talk about Dak Prescott. If we're having a debate about Dak Prescott and Trevor Lawrence, look, I think it's 6 on one hand, half a dozen on the other. I think it's a push when it comes to it. Dak Prescott has been more consistent. He's put up bigger numbers, but Dak Prescott has also had an issue winning big games in the postseason. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence has only been to the postseason once, 1-1, but we saw the comeback after a dismal first half. We saw him bring him back. I think you have to grade him on the curve. So, look, that would be a push. Jared Goff, if it comes down to talent, Trevor Lawrence is more talented. We've seen the ups and downs in Jared Goff's career. He's bounced back, done a great job of leading Detroit into the postseason. We can say Trevor Lawrence is certainly in that conversation. Matthew Stafford's terrific, but on the downside of his career. Yes, he's won a Super Bowl, but now talent for talent, he's coming down. Trevor's going up. I think we can have that conversation. Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence is more talented than Kirk Cousins. Jordan Love had a great year. Let's see if he can duplicate it. But the talent is comparable. I still say Trevor Lawrence probably gets that. Jalen Hurts had a great year coming from being a second-round pick, but last year he certainly didn't play the same. And when he is not running the football, there's the conversation. Is he a better passer and playmaker than Trevor Lawrence? Through the air, I don't think he's a better passer than Trevor Lawrence. So you're there. And then Kyler Murray, the ups and downs that the former number 1 overall pick has had. Look, man, I think you have a reasonable debate that you can put Trevor Lawrence there. So by all accounts, Trevor Lawrence at his worst is a top 10 quarterback. And all of these other quarterbacks that we're discussing, look, man, he's in the same conversation. So when it comes down to talking about who gets paid, all of the aforementioned quarterbacks have been paid. Most of them are in the 40 million plus category. Well, when we think about inflation, the cost of doing business in the marketplace, look, Trevor Lawrence is a $50 million quarterback, no matter what Danny O says about it. You have to pay the quarterback what the market bears. And like it or not, Trevor Lawrence is going to get paid. He's going to be the next guy in the $50 million club. And I will say this, Trevor Lawrence is a top 10 quarterback all day. It's going to continue to be that way. And I think it only gets better as he has an opportunity to play with the supporting cast that he has this year. Had to get it off my chest. It was bothering me. I saw the conversation. People up in arms because Trevor Lawrence is about to get paid. I think at the end of the day, either you have a franchise quarterback or not. The Jaguars have a franchise quarterback. You need to pay to keep him in the fold, because when you have a franchise quarterback, you have a chance. And we certainly understand that the Jaguars finally have a chance to compete with the big boys because number 16 is in the building. So that's the podcast for the day. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also, check out the Believe Network on Fubo. All the great stuff that we have, all the different podcasts associated with the team. You want to check that out. Make sure you come back each and every time we drop one. Get more of your latest stuff on the Jags. I'm Bucky Brooks. I'm here to supply that. I look forward to talking to you next time.